Hi guys, it's Grace with Grace Gets Gastric, and I am here today for a wrap-up slash vlog of my trip to Peru. So if that is something that you are interested in, you should keep on watching. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a sort of talk overview of my trip, and my plan is to overlay video of my trip throughout. So gonna kind of combine talking about what I did with actual video footage, and there is a lot, so I have no idea what this video is going to look like in the end, but yeah, we'll find out together. So I left for my 2-week Peru vacation on really late, or not late, sorry, Thursday afternoon, and then it was we flew to LA, and then we flew to Bogota, and then we flew to Cusco. So we started in Cusco, and we arrived at about like 10 a.m. on Friday, and Peru is 2 hours ahead of where I live at Pacific Standard Time. So we arrived around 10 a.m. And the first day there was really kind of just chilling. My roommate, who I traveled with for the majority of this trip, got pretty bad altitude sickness, which, you know, I told her she should have medication, but some people don't listen. So she thought she would get a migraine. She might get a migraine because she gets migraines pretty regularly, but she actually ended up being really nauseated. And so Cusco's really high altitude, which is why they recommend letting yourself adjust. So the first day we kind of just chilled. We were staying in San Blas, the neighborhood of San Blas, which is really close to the historical area. And so it was like maybe 2 or 3 blocks away from the Plaza de Armas. So we went there that first day and overlooked the square. They have a Catedral, and got some jugo. I got jugo de fresa, which is strawberry juice that they kind of whip up, and it was so good. And we really just chilled and relaxed for a bit. So then day 2, we decided to spend the day really exploring Cusco. And again, like I said, I planned out for us to have a few days to just relax in Cusco before heading to Machu Picchu, just to make sure that we wouldn't have any issues with altitude. So we wanted to take it pretty easy on day 2. So we went to, there's this market, I think it's called San Pedro Market, and it appeared to be closed. Everyone we talked to kept saying that it was open and that it was fine. But then when we went there, it looked like it was closed, and it said something about fumigation, but it said the fumigation hours were in the afternoon, but we went there at 9 a.m. and it was closed. So it was very confusing. It looked like it was closed. Everyone kept telling us it was open, but it was not. So that was kind of annoying, but not a big deal. We instead, after the little mishap, we ended up going to Qoricancha, which is one of the oldest, or like I think the oldest or the most important temple in the Inca culture. And so it used to be called I think Qoricancha is like Temple of Gold, and so it used to be, you know, covered in gold and silver. And one of the last Incan king, and totally Atahualpa, I think was his name. Anyways, the Spanish conquistadors, when they came, the Spanish, they took him, and then they ransomed him for all of the gold, basically all of the gold and silver. They ran the Incan people had to strip Qoricancha of all its gold and silver to give the Spanish as ransom, and then they of course killed the Incan king anyways. But it was really cool to walk through and see. It was beautiful, it was really big, and they had a lot of beautiful views. And then after that we just got lunch, and then we went to this textile museum. So like, you'll know I'm wearing this shirt that I got, not at the museum, but in Peru. And so this is kind of an example of some of the textile work. Textiles are huge in Peru, really big as part of the Quechua culture. And so it was really interesting to kind of walk through this museum. It was a free museum and it was, you know, pretty small, but just showing you the different kinds of techniques and materials that they work with. And so after that, we went and we walked around, and we went to some other smaller markets since the main one was closed, and bought some souvenirs. And then we went to another museum, a Precolombino art museum, which was really cool. So that was another really interesting museum to walk through. And then I think that took most of the day. That evening we went to this really great restaurant called Morena, and I got my ají de gallina, which is one of the traditional Peruvian foods, dishes. I've had it before when I was in Chile when I studied abroad there, and I was really excited to have it again. It was delicious. I also had my first pisco sour, which was also really good. Pisco is sort of their local, really popular spirit. It is a brandy made from local grapes, and it is delicious, and pisco sours are really yummy, so I had one of those. Oh, and also at one point we got coffee at this cafe, and I got a creme brulee with quinoa, and it was so good. I love creme brulee, and I only had a little bit of it because it was a little too much sugar, but the quinoa was such an interesting texture. I really liked it. Anyways, after that, we kind of just walked around at night, went to shops, kind of just took in the vibe of the city. And like I said, it was a pretty chill day, but it was really beautiful. Just being able to take in Cusco. And yeah, just some interesting things at Cusco. It's a huge city, but like the touristy part is really very small. So we were able to walk everywhere. The streets are really narrow. It's a very like historical looking area, right? The Cusco was the heart of the Incan Empire. It was the capital. So it's been around for a really long time. So it was definitely interesting. The driving there is intense. I definitely would not feel safe driving myself. And it's one of those places too where most places, if you are using the restroom, you don't put the toilet paper in the toilet, you put it in the trash can, which is just something that, you know, you have to get used to. But anyways, day 3, we decided to do a little bit of exploration of the Valle Sagrado, or the Sacred Valley. And that is this place, you know, it's right outside of Cusco. It's, you know, it's like a big area, many different valleys. And there's a ton of different really cool, interesting things to see there. You know, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Rainbow Mountain that you can go to. There's Ollantaytambo. There's a whole bunch of different places. We ended up deciding to do Moray y Maras. So Moray is an archaeological site. They think it was an agricultural experiment. So that you can see there's all these different levels of terraces, and each one of these terraces has different types of soil from all over Peru, really, all over the, you know, country. So it's different types of soil, and then each level, like because of how it's constructed, and then like clay and sand and dirt and all kinds of things, they would grow crops at these different levels depending on what temperature the crops did best at. So it was kind of a really interesting, cool thing to see. And then we went to the Maras salt mines, or salt ponds rather, which I didn't know that they had, which was really, really interesting. I'd never seen salt ponds like this before. But they have a natural salt spring that is apparently 3 times saltier than the ocean. And they have all of these ponds, like these 3-meter wide ponds that are like 30 centimeters, I think, deep, or maybe 10, something like that. And they have all of the water that goes into these ponds, and then they let it evaporate, and then you get the salt. So actually, we saw some people kind of harvesting salt there, and I bought some Maras pink salt, and they also had a lot of smoked salt, which is really interesting. But that was really cool, just like just very interesting thing to see. So then we did that. Oh, and part of the tour that we did as well, we stopped off at this farm and saw kind of a textile demo. So there was a local woman who showed us kind of how they dye the alpaca or llama fur, or wool rather, and kind of the techniques. So that was really cool just to see like a live demo. And then we went home, or we went back to Cusco. We ended up doing a tour of the church, the big church in the Plaza de Armas, the Catedral, which was gigantic and gorgeous. They didn't allow photography inside, but it was really cool to just see the lavish attention to details. I've always really, really enjoyed going to places of worship anytime I travel. There's just something about these places that touches me. So I really liked getting to see that. And I was raised Catholic, so Catholic cathedrals in particular are very interesting to me. I am not a particularly devout Catholic, but being raised in that faith, you know, and seeing kind of the things that I grew up with is definitely interesting. Some other things we saw so while we were there, oh god, I'm totally blanking on the name of the saint, but it was a celebration of some saint or another. So there were like parades happening. We saw a wedding, just all kinds of just fun stuff out and about, people living their life. And then that evening we went up to a place at the very top of the San Blas neighborhood, and it's called Limbus Resto Bar. It was highly recommended because it has a beautiful view of the city. So we were up there, kind of watched the sunset and got to see Cusco at night, which was beautiful. And the food and drinks were really good. I got a drink called the cocaína, which is cocaine, and it definitely was intense, but it was really good. So day 4 was the day that we went to Aguas Calientes, which is the Pueblo Machu Picchu, the little town at the base of Machu Picchu. So we got a really early train. I want to say we were at the train station at like 6:30 in the morning. And it's a few hours train ride through beautiful countryside. So you get to kind of see the lovely scenery of Peru and just kind of chill and relax, read some Kindle. And we got in, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 11, I think. And so then we had the whole day really to just relax, acclimate, get ourselves mentally and emotionally prepared for the next day. So we went to a really amazing Italian restaurant, actually, that was super good. And that's actually where I had alpaca. So I tried alpaca. I wanted to try it. It was good. It was like shaved, like kind of like roast beef almost, with like pesto, which is really good. And then we went to the markets. They have a ton of markets there. Obviously, like the souvenirs that you will find in Machu Picchu area are far more expensive than anywhere else, but so I didn't buy too many things there, but there were a couple of things that I did like, so I got those. And then we got dinner at Julian, which was another really good place. I got a pizza, which is like one of the first pizzas I've had since surgery. I don't really eat pizza very often, and it was the ají de gallina pizza, and it was so good. And I was so angry because I could not eat. I think I ate 2 slices and then I ate the toppings off of 2 more slices. So I basically ended up eating half of the pizza, and I was so full. And you know, we didn't have a fridge in our living room. We weren't really going to be eating it again, so I couldn't take it home, but it was so sad because it was really good. Anyways, we got a really early night because we got the very first ticket into Machu Picchu, which is at 6 a.m. And in order to get there at 6 a.m., you really start lining up for the bus around 5 a.m. So we got an early night, got up nice, bright and early. Our hotel was awesome. They made us like a boxed breakfast to take with us. So we kind of ate that while we were standing in line for the bus. You can choose to walk up the, you can hike up to Machu Picchu, or you can take the bus. The bus is $24 round trip, which is very expensive compared to everything else in Peru, which is quite reasonably, like it's pretty inexpensive, but for American sensibilities, we were more than happy to pay $24 round trip, particularly because it's about an hour and a half hike up, because you're hiking up a hill, and then we were already doing hiking while we got there. So I think an hour and a half is generous, and a generous estimate, particularly probably for people who are not experienced hikers. So the bus was the way to go. It's definitely a little nerve-wracking just going up this very steep, very precarious feeling mountain on this bus, but you know that they do this all of the time and they're filled with tourists, so it was all good. So we got there, got into Machu Picchu at about 6 a.m. We did have the ticket, so you pay obviously entrance to Machu Picchu, and then there are 2 additional add-ons you can get. You can hike up Llano Picchu, which is the really steep mountain that you see a lot in a lot of the photos. It's like right on the right next to Machu Picchu. People get really great photos from it, and you can also see it in most photos. And it's a shorter hike, but it's very steep. And it says if you're afraid of heights, don't do this one. And I am afraid of heights, so I did not do that one. The other one is Machu Picchu Mountain, and both of these cost a little extra, but not a ton to do. And they have they allow a limited number of tourists to do them each day, so you have to get them while the going is good. So we decided to do Machu Picchu Mountain, which is supposed to be like a 4-hour round trip hike. There are, I think it was like over 2,600 steps. It's pretty steep. It's still pretty intense. And yeah, we ended up making it about 3/4 of the way through. I would have been down to finish the hike. I was still raring to go, but my roommate just was not up to it. She is not quite as physically inclined as I am, doesn't quite do a lot of the strength training and the working out that I do, and was just not enjoying herself. And we were already like taking quite a long time just to do it. And I was fine. Like we got beautiful views, and I wanted to have time to still kind of enjoy the village itself. So we headed back down, which was almost worse than going up, just because the steps are quite precarious. And it started raining a little bit, so it was a little slick, but we managed. Got to see Machu Picchu. It was amazing. It was definitely a once in a lifetime kind of thing. I'm so glad I did it. It was definitely a great reward for myself for losing this weight. Something that I could have done just the regular village part as an obese person, but it would not have been nearly as enjoyable. I definitely think I think it's hard for me to remember how much I would have struggled, because I was hiking up a mountain and doing fine, but yeah, it was amazing. So after Machu Picchu, we were there for several hours. I think we got back down to the village at around 2. And then we really just bumped around for the rest of the day. We were very tired, physically, mentally, emotionally, just sort of drained. So it was a lot of just kind of chilling, some reading, some catching up on YouTube videos, that kind of thing. And then the next day we headed back to Cusco, but we had a later train. I think it was around 3. And so we checked out. We actually decided to get massages. So there's people always offering massages everywhere. So we went and got a massage, which was really nice. Definitely a little more intimate, I would say, than many of the massages I've gotten here. I think that they're like it wasn't like in an uncomfortable, like bad touch kind of way, but just in I think a lot of the US masseurs are very sensitive, and so they're like almost overly cautious. So like it's really like given all sensitive areas like a 20-foot berth, whereas they were just like getting as close to all the bits as they could without actually being on there. But it was a good massage. It was just a little startling at times. And yeah, then we did some more market shopping, ate, all that kind of stuff, and then took the train to Cusco. It's interesting because Cusco is technically at a higher altitude than Machu Picchu. Like you go down into Machu Picchu, and it was immediately noticeable coming off the train from Aguascalientes into Cusco. Like we had a taxi there to take us to our hotel, and we had to like walk quickly with our luggage for like a minute to get to the taxi. And that would just like knocked us out. We were so winded, just because of the altitude change. And even like my toiletries on the train had started to kind of expand because of it. So that was just really interesting. Anyways, we had another hotel. This one was much closer to the airport because we had a very early morning flight the next morning to Lima. So I think our flight was like at 7. Yeah, like 7 the next morning. So we got into Lima pretty early. I think we got into Lima around 10-ish to the hotel. So we got there. Check-in wasn't until I think 2 or 1. So we dropped off our stuff and then went and did a little bit of exploration. So we went to a supermarket. That is actually one of my favorite things to do when I travel, is go to like a supermarket, a classic supermarket, and just see what they have. So I just like to peruse. So we did that, which was fun. And part of this is because when I was in Chile, there was this snack that I was obsessed with. They're called Ramitas Evercrisp, and they're like little sticks. So I don't know how to describe them. They're like tiny little mini breadsticks, and they had like cheese flavored, And they're, you know, like they're basically like a combination of like a chip and a cracker. Anyways, I became obsessed with them while I was there, and I was like hoping that they would have them in Peru. But turns out it's really just like a Chile thing. They're actually made in Chile, and I think maybe they're in a few other South American countries, but they're not in Peru, which is a bummer. But I digress. So we were staying in the Miraflores area. I think Miraflores, which is like the touristy area of Lima and one of the safer areas. Lima is huge. Definitely some places that are not super safe. So most people, especially tourists, end up staying in Miraflores. So we did the supermarket, and then we went to Parque Kennedy, so Kennedy Park, which is this cute little park. And it's known for all of the cats they have. It's called, like, you know, colloquially known as Cat Park, because there's just literally hundreds of cats that live there, and like the community just sort of cares for them. And they're so cute, and they're just like flopping around, and I love cats. So we went and we sort of gazed at the kitties. And then there was like a big artisan market that was nearby, so we went, perused that. Sorry, I'm like looking at my notes to just kind of remember, make sure I don't forget any big points. And then after we went to the market, we had lunch, dinner, something. We had lunch, and then we went to get our nails done. So my roommate had like acrylics, and several of them had broken, and she wanted to get them fixed, and we had some downtime, so we decided to go and get them fixed. So one thing to know is I used to be fluent in Spanish. That was one of my degrees. I studied abroad in Chile. I have not really spoken Spanish since I went to Guatemala in 2013, so about 6 years. So I am, I would say, conversational now in Spanish, and I certainly can understand a lot more than I can speak, but I definitely forgot a lot of my vocabulary and just conjugations. Spanish has like 14 tenses. It's ridiculous. English has 3. So anyways, I was very pleasantly surprised at how much my Spanish came back pretty quickly. I know if I had stayed there for a lot longer, I would come back all the way. My roommate does not speak a lick of Spanish. And it's kind of interesting just because she grew up in Kuwait, she's Ethiopian. So on looking at us, people would often assume that I didn't speak any Spanish and that she did, which was the complete opposite. And, you know, and she really does not speak anything. So I was really the person to communicate throughout our trip, which is totally fine with me. But we did get separated when we got our nails done. They took her to a different room, and I was just like, okay, I hope she's able to tell them what she wants, which she did. They made use of Google Translate. Everyone's really nice. Because we were at a nail salon where it wasn't like a tourist nail salon, you know, this is where the locals go, and they didn't speak any English, but she was able to communicate. And that's the thing is, people are so willing to try and communicate, you know, they were all very open and willing to talk. So that was nice. But after we got our nails done, we went off to a really fancy dinner. So we went to eat at this place called Arte de Gaston, and it is we did a tasting menu. So I'd never done a tasting menu before. I've always wanted to. And Arte de Gaston is actually I think it's like on like the top 50 restaurants in the world. Like it's really well known. It's like a really nice restaurant. And if we were to do something like that in the US and Europe, it would be way, 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 way more than we paid for it. So it was definitely expensive. I think it was something like $200, but way less expensive than we would have paid in the States for the same quality of food. So it was a 16-course menu, which was incredible. And I was very unsure how that would work with my tiny tummy, but it actually totally worked fine. I think the fact that I'm 21 months out, so I'm close to 2 years out. We ate this 16 courses over 3.5 hours, so it was definitely time to digest. The plates were very small. It's a tasting menu, so it's not like you're getting 16 full meals. And I didn't enjoy every single dish, so there were several dishes that I just didn't eat. Basically, if I wasn't absolutely in love with it, I didn't feel like I had to eat every single bite. And so that also helped, you know, kind of interspersing the ones I adored with the ones that were just kind of But it totally worked. It totally went fine. And I also got to try, as part of the tasting menu, something that I had been wanting to try while I was there, which is cuy, which is the Quechua/Spanish word for guinea pig. So I did try guinea pig while I was there. Wasn't a huge fan, but I'm glad I tried it. I like to try new things. I really will try almost anything. I'm very picky, so I almost will never like it, but I'll try it at least. So the next day, we spent exploring one of the really popular neighborhoods in Lima called Barranco, which is like a very bohemian, artsy neighborhood. Lots of character. I would say that would also be a really good one to stay in if you are visiting Lima. But we went to several museums while we were there. We went to Mate, which is the Mario Testino gallery. So he is, if you don't know who he is a world famous photographer. He's photographed oodles and oodles of famous people. So it was really cool to see some of his work there. He also had a section in there of photographs of indigenous peoples, particularly in Peru. So different traditional dress that were just breathtaking, just gorgeous. We also went to the Osma Museum, which is more traditional, I think, pre-Columbian art or post-Columbian art. For lunch, we went to get Chinese food. So Lima actually has a huge Chinese population, and they have this fusion food called chifa, which is like Chinese Peruvian food. So we got some of that. That was really good. And then we went to this really awesome like bohemian market. It's sort of, I mean, it was very much like a farmer's market, artisanal market in the States, you know? So it was, you know, local, smaller boutique people creating very like bohemian custom hipstery type things. That's where I got this shirt. So this Mana Mon Chakwa, I can't see it backwards and I forget what it says. But it is in Quechua. It's a Quechua phrase that means La Mujer que no teme, or in English, basically woman who isn't afraid. So I got that there. We also got some earrings. My roommate got a dress, you know, like a dress that she wouldn't get here, but it's kind of like a cool thing. It's something that she would totally wear. It's absolutely her style. So yeah, that was like a really cool market that we went to. And then we walked down to the beach. So there's lots of beaches in Lima. It is on the ocean. It was really interesting. It's spring in Peru, but it is, you know, early spring. So in the winter especially, there is a ton of neblina or fog in the city coming off, you know, like the air currents coming off of the water. There's just a lot of fog. So it was pretty foggy still while we were there, which I'm sure you can see by the video, but it was beautiful. And it was nice just to kind of walk along the water and vibe with the place. I love doing that. When I travel, it's just kind of going to different neighborhoods and vibing, you know, and just getting a feel for it. But we did that, and then for dinner, we went to this place called Punto Azul in Miraflores, and oh my god, it might be my favorite meal of the trip. I got this tartar de salmon, this like salmon tartar, that was phenomenal. And my roommate got ceviche. It was so, so good. And then that evening, we went to the Circuito Magico del Agua. So they basically have this big, like a big water show with like lights and water. That was really cool. I mean, it looked like something you would see in Vegas. And it's in this beautiful park with tons of different fountains. I think there are like 14 different kinds of fountains. So it was really cool. We walked around there in the evening. Got to see the light show, which was awesome. And then we headed back to the hotel, and this was for day 9. Oh, sorry. So that was the end of day 8, beginning of day 9. This is my roommate's last day with me in Peru. We decided to explore the historic district of Lima, more central Lima. So the first thing we did was we stopped by the San Franciscan Church and Catacombs. So they have this really beautiful church, and there are catacombs underneath it. So we went on a tour, and it was really interesting because they like dug up all the catacombs and then displayed all of the bones just in very artistic renditions. So it's kind of interesting that they just sort of disturbed these mass graves and then displayed the bones, interestingly, but it was really pretty cool. And the tour was really excellent, and like we learned a lot about the history of the church and kind of the area. And then the plan had been to do a walking tour of downtown Lima, but we made it like 15 minutes on the tour and then lost our tour guide because he had us go on a break for 10 minutes, and then we went back to where he was supposed to be and he was gone. So we got a partial tour of downtown Lima, but then we just did some exploring on our own. So we were there to see the plaza, in the Plaza de Armas, and watching the changing of the guard at like the presidential residence. So something interesting that happened while we were there is, I don't know if you guys are following the Peruvian news, but basically the Congress and the president got into a bit of a spat. It's a very long story, but essentially the president dissolved Congress, and in retaliation, the Congress voted to suspend his presidency for a year. And then they swore in his vice president as president, and the second that the vice president was sworn in, he resigned. And so there's all of this sort of tension about who is president right now. And so they ended up closing down the Plaza de Armas. So like no pedestrian, no foot traffic, no vehicles could get in. So there was some beautiful views of the Plaza de Armas without people in it, but it did make kind of getting around a little bit difficult. And so we kind of wanted to escape. We walked over to Chinatown, which was very close by, and then got a little bit stuck. We were trying to get out of the area, and because of all of the traffic from the Plaza de Armas being shut down, we couldn't really get like an Uber. So Uber is really big there, and that's one of the best ways to travel. So we ended up just like finding a taxi and catching that, and we went to we took the taxi to the Larco Museum, which is it was a really cool museum. It was pre-Columbian museum, so it showed a lot of the Incan culture and then the pre-Incan as well. So it was really interesting. And one of the things that the Larco Museum is best known for is that they have a large collection of erotic pottery. So we got to see some erotic pottery. So apologies for the not safe for work images, but you know, it is just a natural part of our history. After that, we went to Larcomar, which is in Miraflores, and it is a mall, but it is a mall that is set into the side of the cliff overlooking the ocean. So it was kind of it's a pretty popular tourist destination. It's like basically underground, like when you're looking, you can't see the mall because it's built into the side of the cliff. And we ended up eating dinner there at this restaurant, I think it was Mango's, and had another amazing ceviche. So the food in Lima, A+ for sure. Anyways, after that we headed back to the hotel because my roommate had to leave at midnight, and then I left the next morning at 6 for a 3-day tour. So I decided to do like a 3-day more planned excursion with a tour company. Normally I would just kind of do this stuff on my own, but since I was by myself and I had a limited time frame, based on all the research I did, this is actually the best, most cost-effective and fastest, easiest way to do all of the things I wanted to do. So I just went for it. So the first day we drove through to Paracas. We stopped and got food on the way. We stopped at in Chincha, which is a place in Peru, and looked at this old manor house and went through these slave tunnels. So this particular area has a fairly large Afro-Peruvian culture. They did utilize slavery in Peru, so they did have slaves. So that was interesting just to learn more about that culture and more about that history, because obviously I know a decent amount about the history of slavery within the United States, but the United States was not the only place that had slavery. So it was just a different kind of cultural perspective. And then we went to Paracas, which is this fisherman's town. One thing I did want to note at this point, I actually got sick. So I was pretty sick, not pretty sick. I was mildly sick for the last 3 days of this trip. Just did not feel great. And this is when I was by myself. So I really just kind of, every moment that we weren't doing things, I was spent sleeping and not being that social. So normally I would have tried to make more friends, but I was just not feeling great. But anyways, spent the night in Paracas, and then the next morning we did a tour of Ballesta's Island, which is, they call it the poor man's Galapagos. And it is a really cool island. They have, thousands of birds, sea lions, penguins. It was really, really, really awesome. So we got to do a boat tour around that. On our way there, we also passed by this thing called the Candelabra, which is the candelabra. It sounds very similar in English. And it is this big rock, or this big formation, similar to the Nazca Lines. It was carved into the rock, and it looks like a candelabra or a cactus. So it's been there for, I think it was something in BC. Like, it's been there for a long time. After we did the Ballestas Islands, we went and drove through Paracas National Reserve. So there's this like giant reserve as part of, this area in Peru, and they have beautiful views, the ocean, cliffs, red sand beaches, just gorgeous, gorgeous scenery. So we drove through there. And then after that, we drove to the Ica region to a tiny little oasis town called Huacachina. And it is an oasis in the middle of the desert. So we got to go and explore the desert. We went sand boarding, and we did dune buggying, which was awesome and a little bit terrifying. It's sort of like a roller coaster, but it felt less safe. So we were carted all around the desert, and then we did sandboarding, which is we did the uncool kind, because I'm not obviously practicing it, where you just go down these giant sand dunes, like belly first on like a surfboard looking thing. So that was really, really fun. Totally crazy. And all of these things are just stuff I never would have dreamt of doing in my old size, And then the next morning we did Nazca Lines. So we drove to Nazca, and then I did the flight. So the flight, you actually had to be under a certain weight. I think it's like 215. So didn't feel concerned about that. The plane looked like it was made out of paper, but it was all good. Super turbulent, definitely a little nauseating. I think mostly because I was sick already with some sinus, so that kind of threw off my balance. But the Nazca Lines were incredible. That was another big thing. I've been wanting to do that since I was a kid, ever since I read about them in a book. And it was so cool to see all of the different formations that, you can see so clearly from the air, but they didn't have planes when they made them. So it was pretty interesting. It was pretty amazing. And then that was my last day. So after Nazca, we drove basically straight. We drove back to Huacachina and then to Lima, and we got into Lima around 11:30. I had a hostel for a single night. I got in at 11:30, left at 4:30. No, left at 4, and was driven to the airport and came back home. So, I mean, I think that was kind of what was up, what I did. Long wrap up, I know, but I was gone for 2 weeks and I did a lot of stuff. But I had an amazing time. If you guys aren't following me on Instagram, you definitely should. I posted all about the food I ate multiple times over there. Also posted some wrap-ups, so if you want to see more photos, there are more over there. There's also a story highlight. But I hope you guys enjoy these travel wrap-ups. This was a really big trip for me, and definitely a huge milestone for me in my weight loss journey. So I just thank you all so much for being here with me and celebrating with me. And I'll talk to you all very soon.